The world feels warm when you're asleep, but when you wake up, truly wake up, it gets cold. The world gets cold because comfort burns away. Cold because illusions shatter. Cold because presence exposes everything you try not to see. That's what no one tells you about clarity. It isn't light, it's temperature. When you start seeing things as they are, not as you wish they were, the warmth leaves. You stop hallucinating hope and start handling truth. The world doesn't go soft for the awake. It gets sharper, louder, heavier. But that's the price of consciousness. Cold presence is what separates those who think they're aware from those who actually are. The ones who can stay alert through fatigue, distraction, and temptation. Most people seek warmth in distraction. You, as the viewer, as the audience, must learn to generate your own heat from discipline. This is the real work. Staying awake through exhaustion, holding the line through noise, and keeping your awareness cold enough to see reality, even when it hurts. There comes a point where fatigue stops being physical. It becomes spiritual. A quiet war between who you are and who you said you'll become. That's where most people go back to sleep. They don't close their eyes, they close their awareness. They trade clarity for comfort, presence for distraction, process, force, simulation. Simulation isn't illusion, it's opt-in unreality. I'm not talking about daydreaming or imagination here. Those things are great, those things are phenomenal. I believe daydreaming and imagination wandering is essential as a creative and just as a human being in general. I'm talking about a false version of reality you willingly live inside. You aren't deluded by accident. You volunteered. You logged in. You chose it. Scrolling instead of studying. Projecting instead of producing. Reacting instead of creating. But a few stay awake. Not because they're stronger, but because they've learned how to remain conscious in the storm. To see the world as it is, not as their emotions wished it to be. This is about discipline. The discipline of staying awake. I want you to think always or always be run by programs. Most people will die before they think because thinking requires the death of who you've been. This is why I created DE, Die Every Day. Most people aren't alive, they're just running programs. Inherited habits, borrowed beliefs, maybe even yours. You wake up inside a script someone else wrote. And every day you rehearse it, the same thoughts, the same words, the same cycles. When life gives you feedback, you call it bad luck instead of truth. Because feedback feels like failure when you've never studied cause and effect. You don't think, you react. You don't analyze, you assume. You confuse data with destiny. You live normatively, how the world should be, not positively, how the world is. I will go deeper into what that means. Normative economics is people who thinks how the world should be, what they think the world should be. Positive economics is people who think, not even think, they observe objectively how the world is. So it could be the difference between subjective reality and objective reality. There's two types of realities. One reality is that actually literally what it is, regardless of how you think this fact is or not, or how you feel it is or not. Regardless, it's like 1 + 1 is 2, regardless of how you feel or think. Normative is, I don't feel like 1 + 1 is 2. So 1 + 1 isn't 2. And then you go make ridiculous claims at how 1 + 1 isn't true. Just like how people think the world is flat. They go out there and they make crazy claims about why they think the world is flat, or so many other different things. Normative, positive, objective, subjective. Your logic runs on feelings, not feedback. Your reality is borrowed, not built. To think clearly, you have to step out of the simulation, out of your inherited scripts, and enter the raw data of reality. To think is to confront feedback, to see truth in cause and consequence, to realize that clarity has a cost, the death of comfort. the rule of illusion. That's why most people never think. It's not that you can't think, it's that you may not survive who you stop being to do it. That's why most people don't think. They cope. You scroll, you consume, you react, anything to avoid confrontation with your own mind. But thinking, real thinking, is war. It's a rebellion against autopilot. It's dying to the illusion and being reborn with awareness. And once you start, you can't go back. You'll see the world differently. You'll see yourself differently. You'll start noticing how rare it is to find someone who's actually awake. So think deeply, dangerously, relentlessly, because in a world full of people who never will, your mind becomes your weapon. As I was writing, I came up with this acronym. I always come up with different things. And I did with this acronym. It's called RAP, which is reality's receipt. RAP stands for Results Active Process. A result isn't a win or loss, it's evidence. Reality's receipt for what your process has been doing. A receipt is proof of exchange, proof that you offered effort and reality responded. It lists everything you've been spending, your attention, your time, your discipline. Every time on that slip is a habit, a decision, an hour you can't get back. That's why I call a result a receipt, because the total doesn't lie. It tells you exactly what your process has been studying, buying. Most people stare at the receipt and complain about the price. They see the cost of fatigue, rejection, failure, and they feel robbed. But the masters read it differently. They observe it differently. They study the line items. They look for inefficiency. They adjust the order. They go back into the store smarter, sharper, more aware, awake. That's RAP, reality active process, result active process. You don't worship the receipt, you use it. You turn feedback into leverage and re-enter the transaction with clearer intent. Your last upload, your last workout, your last sale, all are receipts. If the numbers are low, that's direction, not doom. If they're high, that's responsibility, not rest. Reality always gives you a receipt. The only question is whether you read it or repeat it. It is proof of principle, not proof of words. It is neutral until you paint it with a story. It is a mirror. It reflects the truth of your attention, your discipline, your repetitions. Read it, adjust it, strike again. That is the active end result. Active process, your re-enter. You don't worship the receipt. You use it. You turn feedback into leverage and you loop. Your last upload, your last rep, your last conversation, your last dollar, each one is a receipt. If the numbers are low, that isn't a verdict, it's direction. If the numbers are high, that is an arrival, it's responsibility. Presence feeds the process feeds the result. The result feeds your next decision, and you stay awake inside every step. You're too focused on the result and not present in the process. Flip it. The process is just as important as any great result, and often is the greater result. If you strip result to its existential core, you move past the dictionary to the thing itself. Evidence. Result isn't equal to win and loss. A result is evidence, the mirror of your process, reality's receipt. Read it, adjust, strike again. A result is not a trophy, not an ending. It's a printout of where your attention, discipline, and persistence collided with the world. Proof of principle, not proof of worth. Neutral until your project, meaning unto it. Neutral until you project meaning unto it. Most people worship results like verdicts. This is a radical take. A result is simply data. The shape reality takes when touched by your action. When you adopt that frame, every day you master the process. You're already producing results daily. That's why believe in yourself, to me, I always say it's overrated. You don't need endless belief. You need entry. All you need to do is believe once, twice at most, and step in. Once you're inside the process, feedback replaces faith. Call it RAP, result active process. You already know the vision. Now prove it in motion over and over again until the process becomes how you see, think, and act. You want infinite results? Build an infinite process. You're still alive. That means keep evolving. A result equals evidence of your consistency. A result equals reality's answer to your effort. Not fair, not unfair, simply true. Most people don't fail for lack of information. They fail because they can't sit long enough in the silence of doing. They chase hits. You don't chase. You observe, adjust, and strike again. Results are gods to worship. They're maps to read. Masters don't chase results. They weaponize them. So Daniel Day-Lewis, he doesn't disappear into character for an Oscar. He disappears because the process consumes him. Kobe Bryant wasn't in the gym at 4 a.m. to collect rings. He was at war with yesterday's self. Nick Saban, his process restarts the morning after a championship, as if nothing was won. Same for Bill Belichick. Brady didn't dominate 2 decades to be the GOAT. He understood the game never ended. The result is feedback, evidence that your process is alive. But the process does not rest. It keeps breathing, consuming, demanding. That's why the greats look detached. They don't cling to rings, trophies, or applause. Attachment rots excellence. Detachment keeps the blade sharp. Thomas Sowell once said, "You're not even equal to your own past self." That's rap. Result, active process. Daily war with your own ghost. No ceilings, no arrivals, only evolution. Standards over excuses. The enemy isn't ignorance, it's slipping standards. The second fatigue becomes your reason, standards die. Raise them high enough that fatigue stops being an excuse. It becomes the battlefield. Discipline isn't about hours worked. It's about staying awake long enough for the problem to bend you. That's where most people quit. They confuse presence with paralysis. But presence isn't stillness, it's pressure, applied until reality cracks. Presence isn't passive. It's the most aggressive force you have. Identify the block, document your state, stay present with the problem, turn presence into process. Clarity is built, not gifted. Here's the loop. Understanding, thought, logic, action, feedback. Stay present in that loop long enough and problems stop being walls. They become raw material. You don't solve them, you convert them into leverage. For example, here's an example. Here's what a clear thought may look like. If I publish a philosopher in the title, it'll cost 100,000 views. So, clear logic forms. Clear action follows. You publish. Now you have clear feedback. Did reality agree? That's your test. If it did, clarity compounds. If it didn't, clarity still sharpens. Either way, your understanding of the world improves. And that's the real point of the process. Because when you stay awake long enough inside your process, not the loop, you start to see the difference. The loop is what traps most people. They repeat unconsciously, mistaking motion for evolution. They live in patterns. They never decide, reacting instead of creating. That's the simulation. But the process is different. Process is the conscious loop, repetition with awareness. You're not circling aimlessly, you're spiraling upward. Each pass refines you. Each repetition compounds clarity. You break the false loop by designing the real one. The real loop, the result, active process. The unconscious loop consumes you. The conscious loop builds you. Because when you stay awake long enough inside your process, your thinking evolves faster than your fear. Your logic replaces luck, and reality bends to your awareness. Here's the 7 levers of strategic thinking. Strategists don't react. You hold the line and think beyond the first move. Because reacting is what the simulation trains you to do. Constant response, zero reflection. Strategy begins when you stay still long enough to see the board. Long-term mindset is played in decades, not days. You stop measuring progress by mood and start measuring it by trajectory. Every repetition compounds quietly until time becomes your ally. Second order thinking, always ask, and then what? That's what you will always ask, and then what? Most decisions fail not from ignorance but from short sight. The first move is emotion. The second is intelligence. You stay awake through both. Reframing, which is keep turning the problem until the skeleton shows. Every obstacle hides a leverage point, but only if you look beneath the skin. The more angles you see, the less power the problem has over you. These are force multipliers. Your force multipliers is small levers, outsized impact. Your process doesn't need to be massive. It just needs to be precise. So the 5 clear decisions that can outperform 500 distracted ones. 5 clear decisions can outperform 500 distraction ones. Presence scales efficiency. Synthesis, which is connected to contradictions until patterns reveal themselves. That's the mind of a polymath, seeing bridges where others see walls. Your ability to integrate opposites, which is the art in logic, faith and feedback, fatigue and focus, is what turns knowledge into wisdom. Storytelling, which is storytelling will be used by persuade by narratives, not noise. Information informs, stories transform. When you understand narrative, you didn't sell, you shape perception. Every sentence will become a strategy as you write. Decision making rules. Know what's reversible versus irreversible. That's your decision rules. Know what's reversible versus irreversible. Make small decisions fast, big ones very slow. Think hard on big decision making. Guard your energy for the moves you can undo. That's how you build optionally. Freedom with structure. Every single time, every writing block, every fatigue reset. All of this trains these levers. If you stay present enough to see what it's teaching you and awake enough to remember where you're going, that's the key. Presence builds the input. This is presence in vision. Have presence in vision. Presence builds the input. Vision directs the output. Presence gives you clarity. Vision gives you weighing. Presence is the engine. Vision is the compass. You need both to stay awake. If you're present without vision, you drift. If you're a visionary without presence, you hallucinate. So when I say stay present, I mean stay conscious in what you're doing while remembering where you're going. So I'm going to say that again. When I say stay present, I mean stay conscious in what you're doing while remembering where you're going. Presence keeps you grounded in reality. Vision keeps you pointed toward evolution. That alignment, that connection between the ground and the horizon is where strategy becomes destiny. You get where I'm getting? You get where I'm getting at? Habits are receipts of process. Reading, journaling, walking, writing, meditating, working out. These aren't hobbies. They're silent multipliers. And they don't stop there. Be a slave to great habits. Each repetition is unseen compounding. The world crowns visible results. This is the idea of the invisible. Have the ability to see the unseen. The real wealth lives in invisible processes. Habits are the dividends of discipline. Every day you show up, you're earning interest on your consistency. Reality pays compound interest to those who can endure repetition without applause. Millionaires don't think in paychecks, they think in systems. Money isn't the win, it's the proof the process works. Money isn't the win, it's the proof the process works. Human capital, you working for the outcome. Asset capital, your system working for you. Life mirrors this perfectly. Working for results is human capital. Building a compounding process is asset capital. Most people are employees of their results. The greats are owners of their process. That's the difference between living transactionally and evolving exponentially. Greatness isn't light, it's dark. It's lonely. It strips you. You'll lose sleep. You'll lose people, comfort. The road will test you until quitting looks like mercy. Don't quit. Hunger is life. Bring shame. We need to bring shame back. Not as cruelty, but as mirror. If you're off code, feel it. Let pain and shame trigger disgust that pushes you to let pain and shame trigger disgust that pushes you to transcend. Use them as fuel or marinate in mediocrity. Your choice. Pain and shame are reality's way of saying you're operating beneath your potential. Dark mode is where you face that truth without flinching. It's not punishment, it's purification. This is a dangerous man code that I wrote. A dangerous man controls his semen, his mind, and his tongue. Self-control makes him impenetrable. He doesn't ever overexpose his energy. He directs it. So know who you are. Build what you are. Act with code. When your code is intact, your world obeys it. When it's fractured, your life reflects the break. A dangerous man doesn't control the world. He controls himself so completely. He controls himself so completely that the world can't control him. Focus, presence, process, leverage. That's the key. If you're not focused, ask why. Write the distraction until it becomes the work. That's presence. Stay with it until it bends. That's process. Repeat it under fatigue, doubt, and chaos. Regardless, repeat it regardless of how you feel. Repeat the system regardless of what you're thinking. That's leverage. Each repetition compounds into clarity. Each clear thought compounds into freedom. So, are you alive in the process, or embalmed in your last result? You choose. It's your decision. It's always your decision. Let me say this in plain words. A result isn't a win or a loss. A result is a receipt, the paper the world prints after you act. It is where your attention, your discipline, and your persistence touched reality and left a mark. If you see it like that, you stop begging outcomes to love you back. You stop chasing trophies. You start studying truth. Because reality doesn't give you trophy, it gives you feedback. And fatigue is how reality checks your foundation. So during World War II, a general named George S. Patton noticed something strange. He noticed that his men weren't breaking because of fear, they were breaking because of fatigue. He noticed that exhaustion was much stronger than bullets flying. Fatigue didn't just slow his soldiers down, it stripped their courage, clarity, and conviction. He noticed a tired man hesitates, a tired man doubts, a tired man will break. So this is when he wrote in his letter to his troops, he said, "Fatigue makes cowards of us all." Not because his men lacked bravery, but because fatigue exposed the truth about their preparation. It revealed how their process is when the body collapses and the mind starts bargaining. Mind over body, mind over matter. Vince Lombardi understood this. To him, but I like to say though, I like to say mind over body, but I also like to say body over mind over body, because I look at them all as one. Because you don't always want your mind over your body. You want them working in sync. So Vince Lombardi, he understood this. To Vince Lombardi, football wasn't just a game, it was a controlled war of discipline. Games weren't won by the flashiest players, but by the man who could still think clearly when his lungs were on fire. Fatigue doesn't start in the muscles, it starts in the mind. So Lombardi, he trained both. He made practice harder than punishment, not to break his players, but to build their process. And this is when a lot of people think Vince Lombardi came up with that quote, but actually it was created by a general during World War II, which was later adapted by Vince Lombardi. And Vince Lombardi is one of the most greatest football coaches to have ever lived. So fatigue sets in. When fatigue sets in, it's not your body that fails, it's your discipline that's exposed. Fatigue is the test. Your result is the evidence. Together they reveal the health of your process. If your discipline collapses under fatigue, your result will mirror it. If your focus cracks under exhaustion, your result will record it. If your process is sound, no fatigue can corrupt it. This is why systems are important. This is why building sustainable, resilient systems are important. And even when you're building a company, like you want resilient systems. If you don't have a resilient system, your company will collapse. Jeff Bezos knows this. He's talked about this. So I digress. I go back to Vince Lombardi. This is what Vince Lombardi understood, and this is what he instilled and trained into his football players. This is what every master learns. The process is protection, conditioning, physical, mental, spiritual. It's the invisible scaffolding behind every visible result. Reality doesn't reward your potential, it rewards your persistence. And fatigue is how it measures it. So when you face the result, good or bad, don't worship it. Read it. Because that's reality's receipt. Proof of how well you held the line when fatigue tried to make a coward out of you. So the awake live in positive reality. They deal with facts, feedback, and evidence. That's what makes them dangerous. They operate from observation, not opinion. But this goes deeper than just economics and reality. Everyone walks through two parallel worlds. Subjective reality, where emotion bends facts until they fit your story. Objective reality, where facts bend you until you align with truth. To stay awake is to live in the tension between the two. To feel deeply but think clearly. Subjective reality is the storm, objective reality is the compass. One keeps you human, the other keeps you sane. Geography can also prove this better than anything. People underestimate it because they think geography is about maps. It's not. It's about the relationship between environment and decision making. Mountains, rivers, borders, these shape nations, economies, and human behavior. So I will say that's why I think geography is really important for you to be aware of it. It's to study context, and context is everything. It's really the underlying subliminal information, data, evidence that you can really get a deeper understanding of the world. Understanding your geographical landscape where you are, understanding the geography of your environment. If you know how terrain shapes movement, you know how environment shapes outcomes. That's what being awake means on a macro level. Knowing where you stand, what surrounds you, and how terrain, physical or mental, changes the cost of every single decision that you make. So, your geographical landscape, your environment, the terrain, it has an effect on how you behave. It has an effect on human behavior, human nature, the human psyche, which all plays a part in your decision making. Geography is living psychology. To be awake, then, is to practice positive economics in motion, I would say. Observe cause and effect without flinching. It's to study geography as living psychology. Study these things. Understand before you start the journey. Understand your environment before you start the journey. It's to reject subjective comfort for objective reality if you lack to understand this. Because when you can stay awake inside pain, when you can stay conscious inside fatigue, you become impossible to manipulate. You stop hallucinating shoulds and start navigating what is. This is the point I'm making. That's what it means to be strategically awake in the process. Not grinding endlessly, not suffering for approval, but staying clear enough to see truth through the fog. The world bends to those who stay awake inside the noise. The night always tests the ones who claim to be awake. It whispers, rest, scroll, and then drift, disappear. It would tempt you to trade awareness for comfort, clarity, and noise, but the process doesn't care about comfort. It only responds to consciousness. When the world sleeps, the awake stay with the work. Not because they enjoy fatigue, but because they've learned that fatigue is the bridge to clarity. Every hour of presence compounds. Every quiet moment builds invisible equity in your evolution. To conclude, being aware of pain and being aware of fatigue and how it can break you, preparing yourself for the inevitable pain that you will experience and the fatigue that you may experience, and to prepare and to build your systems and your processes. To build your systems and to endure the process. I believe that it will make you irresistible. It will make you sustainable. It will make you resilient to the inevitable pain and pain that you will experience, and you can avoid unnecessary suffering. So I like to dig deep into the idea of pain and how we as people can endure that pain and use it as to our advantage. Use it as leverage to our advantage. Fatigue isn't weakness, it's the test. It's the final audit of how prepared you really are. You can't fake discipline when you're exhausted. You can't fake mental clarity when your lungs are burning. Fatigue will expose you. So that's why Mr. Barty players trained harder than anyone else, because he knew what Patton knew. Endurance is relative to preparation. The body doesn't tire when the foundation is strong. The process protects you, and that's the lesson of this whole entire video. That's a lesson for you. You don't need to be a soldier or a Super Bowl coach to understand this. You just have to live long enough to feel fatigue. You know what it feels like, but you don't know how to direct it. And you don't probably understand what its purpose is, or you probably have a misunderstanding of its purpose. The fatigue of trying to build something from nothing. the fatigue of pushing your dream where no one's watching, the fatigue of discipline in a world addicted to comfort. That's true fatigue. When that fatigue hits, remember this: it's not punishment, it's feedback. It's reality testing your foundation. It's asking if your process is as strong as your ambition. Because fatigue doesn't make cowards of everyone, it simply exposes who was never conditioned for the fight. I'll say that again. Fatigue doesn't make cowards for everyone, it simply exposes who was never conditioned for the fight. For some reason, I just thought of Muhammad Ali. From one legendary figure to another, Patton wrote it, Lombardi lived it. Now it's your turn to apply it. Fatigue isn't the enemy, it's the serum. It tells you whether your foundation was built to withstand pressure or crumble under it. Fatigue doesn't only exist on the battlefield or the football field. It exists inside of you, in your nervous system, your emotions, your mind. I heard Jim Harbaugh say prior to training camp earlier this year, he was saying mind over nervous system. That relates to fatigue makes cowards of us all. Pain and fatigue feed off of each other. Pain wears you down. Fatigue makes pain louder. Together they form a loop that drains your strength, clarity, and confidence. It's not just physical, it's existential. Yet here's the paradox. Fatigue and pain aren't your enemies. They are messengers. They're messengers, educators. They tell you what's circulating inside your internal universe. Ignore them and you'll self-destruct. Listen, acknowledge, and understand them. And they'll give you intelligence, they'll give you wisdom, they'll teach you how to see the unseen, how to identify the signal buried within the suffering. Because fatigue can either break you or design you. You can transmit it, study it, and use it as leverage, channel it into creation until something people dream of becoming. Pain reveals where you need healing. Fatigue reveals where you need preparation. Together they show you the blueprint of transcendence. They are not your punishment, they are your process speaking back. Simulation isn't just illusion, it's opt-in unreality. That's the whole theme of this letter. Staying awake in the process. Using fatigue and pain as leverage to your advantage. Because you're not just fighting fatigue, you're not just fighting distraction, you're fighting the simulation itself. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. You can check out some of my digital products in the description. And you're going to read the letter attached to this video. And you all have a great, beautiful day.